Although horror movies can scare audiences silly for 89 minutes of a 90-minute runtime, it doesn't mean much if there isn't a final shot powerful enough to leave a lasting effect. Unfortunately though, because directors understand just how important an ending scare is to the genre, it has resulted in filmmakers and studios often falling into cliches when constructing a film's final image. Hell, over the past 10 years, it has pretty much become obligatory to have one last jump scare tagged onto the biggest movies, and you can see the likes of Sinister or Unfriended as the worst offenders for this. The scariest final shots in horror movie history, then, are often the more understated ones. The ones that get under your skin and stick with you for days. The ones that act as a perfect culmination of a movie's themes. The ones that don't need to resort to a loud noise to scare the absolute crap out of you. I am the waking nightmare, Ash from WhatCulture, and these are the 10 scariest final shots in horror movie history. 10. A Nightmare on Elm Street. While A Nightmare on Elm Street is one of the most quintessential horror movies ever made, its climax is notoriously lackluster. Instead of capitalizing on the limitless possibilities of Freddy's dreamscape, like later films would, this original flick instead opts to pull the villain into the decidedly less imaginative real world. Fortunately, the haunting final shot more than makes up for that finale. Waking up the next day, Nancy gets into a friend's car to go to school whilst her mother waves them off. When suddenly, a familiar red and green hood clamps down on the teens and Nancy's mom is pulled through the front door window in one final jump scare. It's not the startling scare that caps the movie off though, as Wes Craven's flick then cuts to the now series-defining creepy little girls playing jump rope and singing the haunting 1, 2, Freddy's Coming For You nursery rhyme that essentially became the theme tune of the entire franchise. The horror Craven wrung out of blending dreams with reality made Nightmare one of the most unnerving movies ever made. And this unsettling final shot proves exactly why audiences reacted so much to this imaginative horror series. 9. The Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing hasn't only gone down in history for being home to some of the best practical effects ever seen in the horror genre, but for raising an ever-raging question in its final scene. Have either Childs or MacReady become the Thing? As their camp burns down in the middle of Alaska, the two heroes share a swig from a bottle in the full knowledge that if one of them isn't who they say they are, then the other soon wouldn't be either. It probably doesn't matter in the long run though, as by the time the flames die down, the two would almost certainly freeze to death, alien or not. It's that uncertainty that makes the final shot of the burning camp so effective though, knowing the embers of the flames will eventually be extinguished and the two characters will be forced to face the harshness of the cold night next to someone who could theoretically eat their face off at a moment's notice. 8. Wreck. Full disclosure, although Wreck more than deserves its spot on this list, it is also acting as the ambassador for the entire found footage genre. While they aren't all the same, a lot of these movies, the very best ones like the Blair Witch Project and Paranormal Activity included, follow the same generic beats, ending with a final shot of the last surviving hero suddenly being dragged away, killed or attacked as the camera crashes to the floor. Whilst it is an admittedly effective, if overused technique, none of those other movies nailed it quite as well as Wreck. After spending the harrowing finale attempting to avoid the attention of a rotting, nude grandma, final girl Angela attempts to crawl towards the camera, the one light source in the room, only to be dragged away, kicking and screaming into the darkness. As previously stated, it is not exactly an original final shot, but combined with the horror that came before, Wreck's intimate final scare is an undeniably terrifying way to finish off this iconic zombie movie. 7. Saw. Despite kicking off one of the longest, most successful horror franchises and essentially coining the term torture porn, the original Saw movie is actually rather understated. More or less just two people, Adam and Lawrence, locked in a bathroom with a dead body in the middle, a lot of the film is simple build-up to the inevitable moment where one of our two protagonists has to bite the bullet, cut off their own foot, and escape their confines. Of course, one of them does, and it's Lawrence who cuts himself free, crawls away, and tries not to bleed out until he can find help. However, in one final twist, the body in the room turns out to be alive after all. And not only that, it is actually the Jigsaw Killer himself who orchestrated the entire nightmare scenario in the first place. With no way to free himself, Adam maniacally screams at his tormentor for mercy as Jigsaw delivers a final, cutting game over before slamming the door shut, leaving his victim to scream in terror and eventually succumb to his slow death inside his sealed tomb. 6. Inside. Not only is Inside one of the bloodiest horror movies ever made, it is also one of the best. about a pregnant woman who is tormented by another woman who has broken into her house with the intention of kidnapping her baby before it is even born. The French flick is unrelenting from beginning to end. In the finale though, the home invader, now horribly disfigured after being set on fire, actually achieves her goal of stealing the baby. Performing an impromptu cesarean with a pair of scissors, she cuts open a victim's stomach and pulls out the child. That is horrible enough, but if the closing acts of violence didn't leave a lasting impression, then the final shot certainly will, depicting the tormentor holding the newborn baby in a rocking chair, washed in a red glow as the camera just lingers. To call it unsettling would be an understatement, and the surreal final image acts as a suitable bookend to the hell that both the characters and the viewer have just been put through. 5. The Descent. As I have said many a time before, The Descent actually had two endings when it hit theaters back in 2005, a conventional happy one for American audiences, and the more downbeat original that was retained for the UK release. The latter is by far the better of the two, showing main character Sarah finally escaping the caves where the movie is set and getting into a car in the countryside, only to realise the whole thing had been a figment of her imagination and she is still really trapped in the underground tomb and about to be swarmed by monsters. While that is already a terrifying ending, the final shot shows the now completely mentally unstable Sarah alone, covered in blood and hallucinating that she's spending her final moments with her dead daughter on her birthday, while the camera pulls out to show just how far away from safety she really is, and it adds an even scarier, surreal edge to the twist. The best thing about Neil Marshall's movie is how well it mixes psychological horror with full-on monster movie goodness, and no scene blends the two styles more perfectly than this final one. 4. The Conjuring. Although a lot of purists dislike The Conjuring and its many spin-offs for being the type of big-budget jump-scare fest that dominates mainstream horror, there is no denying that James Wan's series puts the focus on quietly unsettling moments as much as it does big, loud set pieces in a way that other movies of its kind just don't. Perhaps what highlights the fact that The Conjuring is a cut above its competition, though, is the original film's final shot. While most mainstream horror movies have the obligatory ending stinger just before the credits roll, Wan superbly subverted the audience's expectation to see a closing jump scare in his 2014 movie. Focusing on one spooky music box that has already repeatedly shown up in the film and always results in something bad happening when the music stops playing, for the entirety of the long take you are on edge as the camera moves closer towards it, waiting in suspense for some horrible monster to show its face by the time the music stops. But nothing ever comes. Instead, the film cuts to black, and you're left to breathe a sigh of relief as you realise Wan has just played the world's scariest prank on you. 3. Psycho. It's pretty difficult to watch Psycho with fresh eyes, stripped of its context and 40 years of pop culture baggage. Just about every frame of the movie has been aped, parodied, or referenced in some way, not least the final shot of serial killer Norman Bates proclaiming that he wouldn't even hurt a fly before staring dead into the camera. However, even with all that media undermining the horror of this final scare, it is still an incredibly unsettling way to cap off the movie. Not only does it finally bring to light just how out of it Bates actually is, if dressing up in his mother's clothes and murdering all of his patrons didn't clue you in, but the look he shoots directly into the camera breaks the fourth wall in a way that shatters the comforting illusion that the horror the audience has witnessed is trapped within the confines of the movie. 2. The Shining. There are plenty of terrifying images in The Shining vying to be its most memorable, but the one that probably has them all beat is the final, baffling image showing Jack attending a party at the Overlook Hotel circa 1921, almost 60 years before the movie takes place. The haunting final image raises so many questions. Is that actually the same Jack from the movie? Is the current Jack a reincarnation of someone else? Are these violent events always doomed to repeat themselves in the hotel? Nobody really knows the answer, but that is sort of the point. The final image is so scary because of just how much it leaves up in the air, and when you inevitably reach a dead end, all you're left with is the uneasy close-up of Nicholson's piercing, evil grin. 1. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The original Texas Chainsaw Massacre cut straight to the bone. Lacking the sheen of other horror flicks at the time, its finale depicts blood-soaked and almost definitely psychologically broken final girl Sally escaping the clutches of Leatherface and the rest of the Sawyer family after being invited over for the worst dinner party of all time and escaping on the back of a passing pickup truck. In response to losing his prey, Leatherface begins to swing his chainsaw wildly against the sunset. The image itself is weirdly haunting, but it's the cut back to Sally looking on in utter horror which cements it as a bone-chilling image. And that's our list. What other final shots stayed with you long after watching? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. I've been Ash, and this has been WhatCulture. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and come back again soon for some more spine-tingling horror content. Thanks for watching.